What would you do if your own son told you to pack your bags and leave the home you paid for? How would you respond if your family thought you were weak, easy to move, easy to erase? This is how I calmly let them believe they had power, right up until the moment they learned whose name was actually on the papers. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Harold Whitford, and 1 week after burying my wife, I learned how fast people can circle a house they never built. I'm 58 years old, retired after 33 years as a structural engineer. I'm the kind of man people don't notice: quiet voice, slow steps, hands that still smell faintly of lumber no matter how many times I wash them. My wife, Marianne, used to joke that I could walk through a crowded room and leave no ripples behind. She meant it as a compliment. Her family, especially her older brother Clive, treated it like a weakness. The day of the funeral reception, I was still running on the numbness that comes right after loss. Marianne and I had been married for 31 years, long enough to make memories feel like furniture. You don't notice how many are in the house until suddenly half the rooms feel empty. The reception hall buzzed with polite conversation and the clink of glasses. People kept telling me I was holding up well, as if grief were something you could carry like a grocery bag. Marianne's portrait sat on an easel near the buffet table. She looked younger in that picture, hair curled at the ends, warm eyes, a smile that came from someplace deeper than politeness. I barely recognized that version of her anymore. I was standing near the coffee urn, letting the steam warm my face when I heard the first comment. Clive was talking to my son Ryan, not bothering to lower his voice. "He's not going to manage that house alone," Clive said. "The stairs alone are a hazard for a man his age. You two will need to make decisions quickly." Ryan nodded like a junior employee being coached by a senior manager. He's 27, impatient, ambitious, and eager to prove himself to anyone who looks authoritative enough. He inherited Marianne's confidence and none of her gentleness. I didn't interrupt. I just watched the steam rising from my paper cup. They didn't know I was close enough to hear, or maybe they didn't care. A few minutes later, I felt a light touch on my elbow. My daughter, Lily, stood beside me with a plate of crackers she wasn't eating. She's 24, soft-spoken, careful with her words the same way Marianne was. Her eyes flicked toward Ryan and Clive. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They shouldn't talk like that." "They're just worried," I said, though even I wasn't convinced. She squeezed my arm. "Maybe, but they forget you're still here." That was something I'd been feeling all day. Not grief exactly, but a strange sense of disappearing. Everyone talked around me, about me, for me. People touched my arm as if I were made of thin glass. Clive spoke like he had already been promoted to head of the household, or Ryan acted like he had been planning this transition for months. I didn't correct them, not yet. The reception dragged on. People hugged me, told stories about Marianne, complimented the flowers, avoided talking about the last difficult months of her life. I moved through the room like a man wading through water. Every step felt slow, dreamlike. The only moment that broke through the fog happened when I walked past the guest table where the condolence cards were placed in a small wicker basket. Right there, half buried under envelopes, I saw it. A sealed letter with my name written in Marianne's handwriting. I froze. Her writing had always been distinctive. Round, steady letters, never rushed. I picked it up gently, like it might crumble, and slipped it into my jacket pocket before anyone noticed. I didn't open it. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I wasn't ready to hear my wife's voice in ink. By the time the reception ended, rain had started tapping faintly against the hall windows. People began gathering coats, offering last hugs, promising to check on me soon. Ryan approached me with the rigid smile he uses in professional settings. "Dad," he said, "can you wait in the car? I need to speak with Uncle Clive about the next steps." "The next steps?" I repeated. "Yeah, for the house, and, the estate stuff. It's better we handle things quickly." Handle things, as if my entire life were a file that needed sorting. Clive walked over, clapping Ryan on the back. "You did well today," he told him, like the funeral had been Ryan's presentation. Then he turned to me. "Harold, we'll take care of everything. You just focus on resting." Resting. A word people use when they don't think you're capable of much else. I nodded, because nodding is easier than starting an argument you're not ready for. My mind was too tired to fight, but not numb enough to miss the insult. The drive home was quiet. Lily sat in the passenger seat, holding the plate of untouched crackers. Ryan followed in his own car behind us. He said he'd stop by later to go over things. He'd said it with a tone that told me he wasn't asking. When we got home, the house felt different. Not because Marianne was gone, That absence was already familiar, but because of the way Ryan stepped inside ahead of me, flicking on lights, scanning rooms like someone assessing property, not memories. He started talking about storage units, decluttering, market trends. His sentences blended into each other, forming one long assumption that the house would be sold soon. At one point he said, "It's a big place for you alone," as if that settled everything. I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen, hung my jacket, and felt the outline of Marianne's letter against my chest. A small, solid shape. A reminder that not everything belonged to the committee forming around me. Lily followed me and helped unpack leftover containers from her car. She kept glancing at me, as if checking whether I was going to break apart like fragile pottery. "Dad," she said softly, "you don't have to let them rush you." "I know. But you look like you're letting them." I rinsed a plate in the sink. "It's been a long day." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "They're meeting a real estate agent tomorrow." That stopped me. "Who told you that?" I asked. "Ryan texted me this morning. He thought I'd be excited." She shook her head. "He doesn't understand what this house means." I did understand. I'd built this house for Marianne when Lily was 3. Every beam, every tile, every window frame had passed through my hands. But to Ryan and Clive, it was just an asset. After Lily left for the night, the silence in the house grew deep. I sat in the living room without turning on the television. The funeral flowers on the coffee table filled the air with a heavy perfume. Somewhere upstairs, the heating system clicked softly, settling into its nightly rhythm. Finally, I reached into my jacket and pulled out Marianne's letter. Her handwriting looked exactly as it always had. Sharp, careful, certain. I turned it over once, twice, but didn't open it. Not tonight, not with my mind in this fog. I tucked it into the drawer of the side table. Tomorrow, I thought. I went to bed early, but sleep came slow. When it finally did, it lasted only a few hours. I woke before dawn and walked into the kitchen to make coffee. That's when I heard voices. At first, I thought I was imagining them. But as I stepped closer to the doorway, I recognized the low tones of Clive and the sharper edges of Ryan. They were in the kitchen, unaware I was standing just around the corner. Ryan said, "He won't fight us. Dad doesn't like conflict." Clive replied, "Good. We'll get the house on the market by next week." My hands tightened around the edge of the doorway. The early morning light stretched long shadows across the floor. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought I couldn't. They thought I didn't know what was mine. And in that moment, half asleep, half grieving, a strange calm settled over me. A quiet, steady certainty I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. The name on my phone screen that morning was one I had not seen in years. It was Marcia Keaton, an attorney I knew from a long time ago. She had handled some small things for us in the past, a dispute with a contractor, a property tax question. Marianne always said Marcia was the only lawyer she trusted. The phone kept buzzing in my pocket while Ryan and Clive stood at the kitchen counter with mugs of coffee, talking low and fast about time frames and market conditions. They did not notice the sound or pretended not to. I stepped back into the hall before I answered. My voice still sounded rough from sleep when I said hello. Marcia spoke gently. She said she had heard about Marianne's passing and wanted to offer her condolences. Her tone was professional but warm, like someone who knew you on paper and just enough in real life to care a little more. I thanked her. My eyes drifted to the family photos on the wall. In one of them, Ryan was 8 years old, holding a toy truck. Lily was 5, leaning on my shoulder. Marianne's hand rested on my arm like it belonged there. Marcia asked if there would be a good time for me to come by her office. She said there were things Marianne had arranged that we needed to talk through when I felt ready. She told me there was nothing urgent, that it could wait a few days. I said I would call her back soon. I ended the call and stood there in the hallway for a moment, listening. In the kitchen, Clive told Ryan that the spring market would be strong, that buyers in this area were ready to move fast. He said they could get a very good price if they did not hesitate. Ryan replied that he did not want to drag things out, that it was better for everyone to act quickly. Everyone. I walked into the kitchen. They went quiet, then shifted their faces into something softer, more careful. Clive asked if I had slept at all, or Ryan asked if I wanted him to make more coffee. I told them I was fine. I did not bring up what I heard. I did not mention the phone call. Instead, I sat at the small table by the window and watched the light come up behind the trees. The backyard still held the shape of Marianne's work. She had chosen the shrubs, the little stone path, the bird feeder that always leaned a little to one side. I had built the deck with my own hands, one summer when Ryan was still short enough to walk between the posts. Looking out at that yard, my mind went backward. We moved into this house when I was 33. Back then, it was not much to look at. The walls were bare drywall, the floors scuffed pine boards, the kitchen old and yellow. Marianne saw potential. I saw angles, beams, and load paths in my mind. We made a plan. I worked my regular job during the week and spent evenings and weekends turning the house into something solid. I reinforced the framing, I replaced the old wiring, I raised the ceiling in the living room. I remember those weekends clearly, sawdust in my hair, sweat on my neck, Ryan sitting on the stairs with toy cars, Lily falling asleep on a pile of blankets while Marianne painted trim. Clive visited once during those early months. He walked through the place in a pressed shirt and shiny shoes, looked at the half-finished kitchen, and told Marianne that this was a big project for someone like me. He said a contractor could finish it in half the time. He said he knew people. Marianne smiled and reminded him I was a structural engineer. She said I knew what I was doing. Clive shrugged and said designing something on paper and building it were different things. He clapped me on the shoulder and laughed, like it was just a joke. It did not feel like a joke. Over the years, that tone never really changed. Clive made a career in real estate. He talked about closing deals, flipping houses, leveraging assets. He always spoke like he understood property better than anyone else. Even when he stood in the living room I had rebuilt from studs, he treated it like another product on a future spreadsheet. Ryan grew up watching that. As a teenager, he listened to Clive's stories about big commissions and aggressive offers. Clive called him sharp, said he had a head for numbers. When I tried to teach Ryan how to fix a cabinet door or change a tire, he lost interest after 5 minutes. But he would sit at the table for an hour if Clive was explaining how to use other people's money to buy something. It did not happen overnight, but slowly, Ryan started talking to me the same way Clive did. He would ask my opinion on something, then nod without really hearing my answer. If Marianne and I had different ideas, he tended to side with her, especially if her family agreed. When college came, Marianne and I agreed we would help as much as we could. I took extra consulting work, quiet side projects, checking designs for smaller firms. I did them late at night after my regular job, tired but steady. We paid tuition bills on time. I skipped new tools and big purchases. I drove the same truck for 15 years. Clive said I was too careful with money. He told Ryan that sometimes you have to push harder, take bigger risks. He advised us to refinance once, said we were sitting on equity we were not using. I told him I preferred stability. He told Marianne that I was old-fashioned, that I did not understand modern finance. She defended me, but less firmly as the years went by. Lily saw more than she said. She has always watched people closely. When Clive teased me at family gatherings for bringing homemade dishes instead of ordering catering, she rolled her eyes. When Ryan joked that I would never leave this house because I did not know how to live anywhere else, she changed the subject and asked about my projects. There was another place, too, one almost no one in Marianne's family cared about. Years ago, before the kids were grown, I bought a small property in the foothills. It was barely a cabin at first, more of a rough box with a metal roof. I found it through a retired contractor who wanted it off his hands. Marianne liked the idea of a quiet retreat. Clive said it was not a smart investment, that all the real value was in the city. I did the papers myself with the help of a small-town clerk and a tired notary. No big loan, no large risk. Just slow work, save money, and sweat. I spent years fixing it up, piece by piece, using leftover materials from other jobs. To Marianne, it was a peaceful escape when we managed to get away. To me, it was proof that I could still build something with my own hands. To Clive and Ryan, it barely existed. It did not fit their picture of how property should be used. When Marianne got sick, everything began to tilt. We spent more time in hospitals and clinics than at home. At first, everyone was kind. People brought food, called to check in, sent cards. But as the months went by and treatment decisions became harder, the tone changed. Clive started sitting in on appointments. He said he wanted to support his sister, but in the hallways he talked more about the cost of things than about her comfort. He told me I should think ahead, that medical bills could eat into the value of the house. He hinted that we needed to be strategic so the kids would not be left with problems. Ryan visited when he could, but when he did, he often ended up in another room with Clive, talking in low voices. Sometimes I walked in and the talk stopped. They would say they were just worried about the future. Lily stayed late with Marianne, reading to her, holding her hand, doing small care tasks the nurses approved. She did not talk about assets or bills. She asked me how I was anyway, even when I said I was fine. There were two moments that still sit in my chest. The first was in the hospital cafeteria. Clive pulled me aside and told me that if the worst happened, I should not worry. He said he and Ryan would handle everything. He said they would make sure the house did not sit empty, that things would be arranged quickly. The second was near the end, when Marianne was back home. She and I sat in the living room one quiet afternoon. She looked tired, but peaceful. She put her hand over mine and told me that I had always taken care of everyone. She said she hoped I would let someone take care of me for once. I told her I would try. She smiled a little and said that I should trust what we had already put in place. I did not fully understand what she meant. Now, standing in my own kitchen with a half-cold mug of coffee, listening to Ryan and Clive talk about time frames and listing photos, I began to get a small idea. They left mid-morning. Clive said he had appointments. Ryan said he needed to make some calls. Before he walked out, he rested a hand on my shoulder and told me not to worry about any of the practical stuff. He said he would organize everything. He said the best thing I could do was rest and not stress myself. When the door closed, the house finally went quiet. I walked through each room slowly. The living room with the raised ceiling, the dining room where we had family dinners I paid for and Clive judged. The staircase Ryan said was too steep for a man my age. I lightly touched the railing I had sanded smooth with my own hands. In the hallway, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. She had sent a message. She wrote that Ryan had asked her to meet him that afternoon at a real estate office. He had told her he wanted her to see the plan and reassure me later that it was the right thing. She said she did not like the way he talked about it. She asked if I knew he was already using the words sale and closing date. I stared at the screen. My reflection looked back at me in the black glass between messages. Tired eyes, gray hair, face lined from years of sun and strain. Ryan thought he was already in control. Clive thought I was too weak to step in. They believed they understood the value of this house better than the man who had rebuilt it. I put the phone down on the hall table beside Marianne's wedding photo. My hand rested for a second on the drawer where her sealed letter waited. Later, I thought. First, I needed to hear exactly how far they planned to go. That evening, as the light faded, I received another message from Lily. She said the meeting was over. She said Ryan had spoken to the agent as if he owned the place already. She wrote that he had told the agent the house was as good as on the market, and that his father would sign whatever was needed because he was not in a state to argue. She ended the message with one more line. She said Ryan had laughed and told the agent that I was not going to be a problem, that I was basically just a formality. I sat at the kitchen table with Lily's last message glowing on my phone. Ryan thought I was a formality. The words sat there on the screen, small but heavy. For years, I had signed school forms, loan documents, and permission slips. Now my own son had turned me into a box to be ticked. Outside, the daylight was fading into that flat gray that comes before dusk. The house creaked in familiar ways, the heating system sighing, the fridge humming. It was the same place I had lived in for decades, but suddenly it felt like someone else's floor plan. I put the phone down carefully, as if the glass might crack under my hand. My coffee had gone cold. The mug left a ring on the table. Marianne used to tease me about that. She would wipe the spot and remind me that wood absorbs everything if you do not look after it. My son was trying to absorb my life the same way. I slept badly that night. When I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the real estate agent I had never met, nodding through a list of updates Ryan wanted to make. I saw strangers walking through my rooms, opening cabinets, checking closets, judging my choices like they were temporary. By morning, something inside me had settled. The grief over Marianne was still there, thick and hard, but now another feeling had joined it. It was not loud anger. It was quieter than that. It felt like the steady weight you feel when you pick up a tool you have used your whole life. Familiar, certain. After breakfast, I picked up the keys to the truck I had kept running for 15 years. I put my phone in my pocket, took Marianne's letter from the drawer, and slipped it into my jacket. I did not open it yet. I just knew I did not want to leave it behind. When I reached the real estate office, I sat in the truck for a moment and watched the glass doors. People moved in and out carrying folders and laptops. The building had that clean, fake modern look. Too much glass, not enough soul. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and printer toner. A receptionist with practiced warmth asked if I needed help. I told her my name. Her eyes flicked to her monitor, then back to me. She said that Ryan and Mr. McCallan were in a meeting with one of their agents. She asked if I wanted her to let them know I was there. I told her no. I said I would just sit for a while. The waiting area chairs were small and low, made for quick visits. I sat with my back straight and watched the hallway. A door was slightly open not far from where I was. Voices carried through. I recognized Ryan's the moment he spoke. Even as a child, his voice had a sharp edge when he wanted something. He told the agent that the house needed to move quickly. He said the market was hot. He said they could not let sentiment get in the way. The word sentiment sounded sour in his mouth. The agent asked something in a lower tone. I could not hear the exact words. Clive answered. Clive said that I would sign what I needed to sign. He said I was tired and not in a state to make complex decisions. He said it was better if they handled everything. The agent asked again if my name was on the title. Ryan answered. He said that as far as he knew it was a joint thing, but that his mother had always said the house belonged to the family, not to one person. Clive added that there would be estate documents in time, but that the important thing now was to get a listing agreement ready. He said delays were the enemy. My hand tightened around the arm of the chair. I stared at the framed poster on the opposite wall that showed a smiling family holding a set of keys. The slogan underneath talked about new beginnings. Nobody in that poster looked like me. The agent asked again about my involvement. This time his tone was more careful. He said the seller had to be fully informed and willing. Ryan laughed. He said that I was just overwhelmed and that I trusted him. He said a few papers would not be a problem. He joked that I never really read long documents anyway. He was wrong about that. I spent 33 years reading structural plans line by line. I knew exactly what could happen if you trusted the wrong detail. The receptionist looked up when I stood. I nodded to her and walked down the hallway toward the open door. I did not knock. I just stepped in. Ryan was sitting at a small round table, a stack of glossy folders in front of him. Clive sat beside him, leaning back in his chair like he owned the building. The agent, a thin man with tired eyes, looked up first. Ryan's mouth opened and then closed again when he saw me. He looked like a child caught going through a drawer. Clive recovered faster. He smiled, a smooth expression he used for clients. He asked what I was doing there. His tone was light, but his eyes were not. I told him calmly that I wanted to hear any discussion about selling my house. The agent shifted in his seat. He introduced himself, then started to explain the process of listing a property. He talked about photos, descriptions, staging. He mentioned a suggested starting price. I listened to every word. When he paused, I asked one question. I asked who had signed anything so far. The agent said nobody had yet. He looked at Ryan and Clive as he said it. I nodded. I told him I appreciated the information and that I would reach out if I chose to proceed. Then I turned to Ryan. I reminded him that the house was not just a building. It was the place his mother had lived and died. It was the place we had built together. I told him that decisions about it would not be made in my absence. Ryan's jaw tightened. He said he was only trying to help, that he thought I would want less stress. He said keeping a big house was too much work. I did not argue. I just said that until further notice, nothing was to move forward. No listings. No photos. No promises. Clive said I was acting out of emotion. He said grief made people cling to things they should let go of. He said a professional would tell me the same thing. I told him I would speak to a professional. Then I left. My legs did not shake on the way back to the truck. My hands did not tremble on the steering wheel. Instead, I felt something like balance returning. Like a building settling evenly after the supports had finally been adjusted right. When I reached home, I did not go straight to the kitchen or the living room. I walked through the house and opened the door to the garage. The smell of oil and old wood wrapped around me as I stepped inside. My workshop took up one side of the space. The workbench, the hanging tools, the clamp marks on the edge of the table, they were all exactly where I had left them. I switched on the old radio in the corner, not for the sound, but for the company of low static and distant music. Then I set Marianne's letter on the workbench and opened the metal cabinet I kept against the wall. Inside were boxes I had labeled over the years. Some held receipts for building materials, some held old project notes. One, near the bottom, had a label written in my careful block letters. House, titles, and records. I pulled it out and set it on the bench. Dust lifted in a faint cloud. For a moment, I just stood there looking at both things on the table, the box and the unopened letter with my name on it. Ryan thought I never read documents. Clive thought I never understood them. They were about to learn otherwise. I opened the box first. Inside were folders, each one labeled. Purchase agreements, renovation permits, tax statements, a copy of the original deed, later paperwork filled in the gaps. Every few years, whenever we updated something or refinanced a small section for improvements, I had saved the receipts and notarized forms. Near the back, a thicker folder caught my eye. The paper was newer, the edges clean, the clips tight. It carried both mine and Marianne's names on the tab. I did not open it yet. I only slid it to one side. Then I picked up Marianne's letter. My fingers shook slightly now, not from fear, but from the weight of all the time inside that sealed paper. I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it carefully. Her handwriting spread across the page, steady and clear. She started with small things, memories, thank yous. She wrote about moments I had almost forgotten, the way I had carried Lily to bed after she fell asleep on the sofa, the night the roof leaked and I had climbed up in the rain to cover the hole, the way I always made sure the porch light was on when she came home late. Then her words shifted. She reminded me of conversations we had had in quiet kitchens and hospital rooms, talks about what would happen if she did not recover. She wrote about wanting to protect me from being managed after she was gone. She mentioned specific dates and meetings I remembered vaguely. A visit with Marcia, a notary appointment, a morning when she had asked me to sign some forms with her. I had signed them because I trusted her, because she said it was about simplifying things, because she had always been the one who dealt more comfortably with official offices and waiting rooms. Now she laid out, in simple language, what she had done. She had written everything in a way I could understand without legal training. She described changes to how the house was registered. She explained how decisions about it would be made. She mentioned something about my rights, about life use, about control that did not end with her last breath. She also wrote one line about Ryan and Clive. One simple sentence. She said she knew they could be persuasive and that she did not want them pushing me into choices I did not want. I read the letter twice. Then I set it beside the thicker folder from the box. I did not open the folder fully. I did not need to yet. I could see enough through the top, official stamps, signatures, my name, Marianne's name, and another name printed clearly near the bottom. It was Marcia's. The radio crackled in the background. In the quiet of the garage, with dust floating in thin light from the small window, everything seemed to line up in my mind like beams on a plan. Ryan thought I was just a formality. He was wrong. I reached for my phone with hands that were now completely steady and scrolled to the number that had called me that morning after the funeral. When Marcia answered, I told her we needed to set a time. Not someday. Soon. Marcia gave me an appointment 2 days later. She said her schedule was full, but she would make time. Her voice on the phone was steady and practical. She did not speak to me like a fragile old man. She spoke to me like a client who needed clear steps. The morning of the meeting, I woke up before my alarm. The house was quiet. Light edged in through the curtains. For the first time since the funeral, I did not feel heavy when I swung my legs out of bed. I felt tired, but there was a shape to the day, a clear line. I made coffee, drank it at the kitchen table, and looked around. Every object in the room had a memory connected to it. The chipped blue mug Marianne loved. The small burn mark on the countertop from a pan I had placed down too fast. The crooked picture frame Lily had tried to hang when she was 12. I let myself feel those things for a moment. Then I stood up, went to the garage, and took the letter and the folder I had found. I put them into a plain envelope, closed it, and slipped it into my bag. The law office was downtown, in an older building squeezed between two newer ones. The elevator smelled like dust and strong cleaner. When the doors opened on Marcia's floor, I walked into a hallway lined with framed documents and quiet doors. Her assistant led me into a small conference room. The table was smooth and cool under my hand. A window looked out over the street. People below moved quickly, crossing the sidewalks, carrying coffee, hurrying somewhere. I watched them for a moment before Marcia walked in. She looked the same as I remembered. Dark hair pulled back, simple clothes, glasses she pushed up her nose when she read. She shook my hand, sat down, and folded her fingers together on the table. She did not say sorry for my loss more than once. She said it once, simply. Then she asked how I was managing. I told her the truth. I said I was sad and tired, but also clear. I put the envelope on the table. I told her I had found the letter. I said I knew Marianne had spoken with her before. Marcia nodded. She said Marianne had been very careful. She said she had been prepared for things other people did not want to think about. She asked if I had read the letter. I told her I had. Then I asked if what Marianne had written was real, if what she described had actually been done. Marcia opened the envelope and glanced through the folder. She took her time. Her eyes moved from page to page. Once in a while, she nodded to herself, like she was matching what she saw with something she already knew. After a few minutes, she looked up. She told me Marianne had been very clear with her goals. She said Marianne wanted to protect me from being pushed, especially by people who thought they knew better. She did not give me every detail in that moment. She said we would go through everything slowly, but she gave me enough. She told me that certain things about the house had been changed a while ago, that my rights in relation to it were stronger than I thought, that some decisions people assumed they could make were not theirs to make. She did not mention Ryan or Clive by name. She did not have to. I asked her one question. I asked if someone could sell my house without my agreement. She said clearly that they could not. Then she tapped one of the pages with her finger and said there were also instructions from Marianne about how any inheritance should be handled. She said Marianne had taken steps that might surprise our children. I sat back in my chair. I let that settle inside me. Surprise was a small word for what I imagined. Marcia asked about Ryan and Clive. She asked what they had said and done since the funeral. I told her. I kept it factual. The early real estate meeting, the talk in my kitchen, the way Ryan had spoken to the agent, the way Clive had spoken about me. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she wrote a short note on a yellow pad. She told me we did not need to confront anyone today. She said the first step was to make sure all the necessary documents were in order. Some already were. Some needed updated copies. Some needed to be pulled from offices that did not look kindly on lost paperwork. She suggested I go by the courthouse and request certified copies of certain things. She wrote a list in clear, simple handwriting and slid it across the table. House records, previous filings, one or two other items connected to Marianne's instructions. I asked if I needed to tell anyone what I was doing. She shook her head. She said this was simply responsible management. Nothing secret, nothing strange. Just a man taking care of his affairs. On my way out, her assistant handed me a small card with the date and time of a future appointment already written on it. Back on the street, the air felt sharper. People still moved fast around me, but I did not feel like I was standing still anymore. I had steps to follow. At the courthouse, the clerk behind the glass window barely looked up when I slid Marcia's list under the opening. She stamped forms, handed me a pen, and asked for my ID. Everything was ordinary. People around me were paying tickets, signing licenses, doing small tasks they would forget about tomorrow. But for me, each stamp and signature felt like putting another piece of a load-bearing wall back in place. When I finally held the certified copies in my hands, they felt heavier than regular paper. I did not read them fully there. I did not need to. I just checked that the names, dates, and seals were visible. As I walked out into the courtyard area, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily. She said Ryan seemed calmer today. He had told her he was sure I would come around. He had said things would move faster once I stopped being emotional about the house. She ended the message with a small question. She asked if I was really okay. I told her yes. I said I was taking care of some paperwork. She replied with a single word. She wrote, "Good." On the way home, I stopped at a small cafe Marianne had liked. They made coffee strong enough to wake you up even on the worst days. I sat at a corner table and spread the courthouse envelope next to my cup, but did not open it. Instead, I watched people come and go. At one point, I noticed a reflection in the window, my own face, lined but calm. I did not recognize myself from a week ago. That man had been drifting. This man knew where he was going. When I got home, Ryan's car was parked in the driveway. He was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the sofa, scrolling on his phone. He looked up quickly when I walked in. He asked where I had been. His tone was careful, but there was an edge under it. He did not like not knowing my schedule. I told him I had been handling some things. He said he hoped I was not tiring myself out. He reminded me that grief could make people act strangely. He said he just wanted what was best for me. I looked at him and saw not a villain, but a young man who thought control and care were the same thing. He had watched Clive for too long. I thanked him for his concern. Then I told him clearly that nothing was to happen with the house until I said so, not until certain matters were reviewed properly. He frowned. He asked what matters. I told him I had spoken with Marianne's lawyer. That made him sit up straighter. He asked what she had said. He wanted exact details. I did not give them. I said only that Marianne had made some arrangements ahead of time and that I needed to respect those. He tried again. He said he needed to know what was going on if he was going to help. I told him his help, for now, was to give me space. He did not like that answer. I could see it in the tight set of his jaw, but he did not push further, not that day. He went into the kitchen, made himself a sandwich, and left without another word. When the door closed, the house felt easier to breathe in. That night, I went back to the garage. The radio murmured in the background. I cleared a space on the workbench and laid out what I had gathered so far. Marianne's letter, Marcia's list, the stack of certified copies. I did not dive into every line yet, but I started placing them into labeled folders. One for the house, one for the other property, one for the matters Marianne had hinted would surprise the children. As I worked, I noticed that my hands moved the same way they did when I was laying out measurements for a project. Straight lines, clear labels, no rush. Somewhere in the middle of arranging papers, my phone buzzed on the bench. It was a message from Clive. He wrote that he understood I was going through a tough time. He said he hoped I was not letting complicated legal talk confuse me. He advised me to lean on his experience and Ryan's energy. He ended with a line about keeping the family assets healthy. Oh, I looked at the message for a long time and then put the phone face down. The next few days followed a quiet pattern. In the mornings, I handled small tasks around the house, fixing a loose handle, clearing Marianne's herb garden, which had overgrown without her careful hands. In the afternoons, I reviewed more papers at the kitchen table or met briefly with Marcia to clarify something. Ryan and Clive seemed to relax a little after my first firm pushback. They stopped mentioning agents for a while. Ryan came by once with takeout and talked about work. He spoke as if the house situation was just paused, not changed. At one point, he made a comment. He said that once everything was finalized, things would be easier. He talked about a possible sale price with the same excitement he had shown when he bought his first car. I listened and filed the information away. The more they revealed about their assumptions, the clearer my own path became. At the end of that week, Marcia suggested something else. She said that, given the way everyone was talking, it might be wise to gather all the interested parties in one place soon. Not for a fight, but for clarity. She said people like clear lines. They do not like surprises in private, but they accept them better when everyone hears them at the same time. I asked what that would look like. She said she could arrange an estate discussion, a meeting about Marianne's wishes, and the legal situation. Neutral ground. A community room she sometimes used for these things. Not at her office, not at my house, not at Clive's. She said it would be better to have witnesses and a calm setting. I agreed. She said she would send out invitations to Ryan, Lily, and Clive. She said I did not need to handle that part. She would frame it as a standard review of Marianne's arrangements. That night, after I got home, I sat in my chair in the living room. The evening news murmured on the TV, but I wasn't watching it. My phone lay on the side table. A few minutes later, a new notification lit the screen. It was a calendar invite from Marcia. The title read, Estate Review, Marianne Whitford. The location line named the community center down the road, the larger meeting room. The date was set for the following week. As the screen dimmed, another notification popped up almost at the same time, a message in the family group chat. Ryan wrote that he had just received a notice about an estate meeting. He said this was good. He wrote that finally everything was about to be sorted out. The week before the meeting felt like the air before a storm. Still, but not empty. Nothing dramatic happened. There were no shouted arguments, no slammed doors. The house stayed quiet. The changes were inside, in the way I moved and the way I looked at things. The morning after the calendar invite came through, Marcia called. She said she wanted to go over a few final items before the estate review. Her tone was calm, businesslike. She spoke as if this were just another file on her desk, and at the same time, there was a weight in her words that told me she understood what it meant to me. She asked if I could come by the office and also stop at the bank the same day. She said it would make things easier. I agreed. Before I left the house, I stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos again. Ryan in his graduation gown, Lily smiling with a crooked cap, Marianne holding a cake she had baked for one of my birthdays. All the pictures showed moments when everyone assumed I would always be there in the background, holding the frame up without being seen. I took one photo down. It was the one of Marianne and me on the day we finished the main renovation on the house. We were standing in front of the new front door, both of us dusty and tired, but smiling. I wrapped it in a towel and put it into a small box. I did not know yet if I would move it, but I knew I did not want it touched by anyone else. At Marcia's office, we sat at the same small conference table as before. This time, she had more papers laid out. She did not slide each one to me and read every line aloud. She summarized them in simple language, the way she knew I preferred. She reminded me of Marianne's instructions. She explained how the meeting at the community center would work. She said she would speak first, then give me room to say what I wanted. She said it was important that I let her handle any legal questions, so there would be no confusion or room for twisting. I agreed. At one point, she placed a short stack of forms in front of me. She said these were follow-ups to things Marianne had already set in motion. Nothing new, nothing strange, just the final pieces that needed my signature, confirming what was already drafted. I did not ask for legal terms. I let her explain them in plain language. Control, use, protection, clarity. Words I understood. I signed where she showed me. Each signature felt like tightening a bolt on a structure I could not see fully yet, but trusted. After that, I drove to the bank. The branch manager was a man about Ryan's age. He tried to speak to me in that slow, careful way people sometimes use with older customers. I did not mind. I had used the same tone myself years ago with nervous clients who could not read technical drawings. When he checked my file and saw certain notations, his tone changed. He became more straightforward. He asked for my ID again, double-checked details, and then disappeared into an office behind the counter. When he came back, he carried a thin folder. He said there had been some updates to accounts after Marianne's passing. He used phrases I remembered from Marcia's summary. He asked me to confirm a few things. I did. He printed a summary of one account and slid it toward me. There were numbers on it that would have impressed Ryan and Clive. I let my eyes pass over them only long enough to see that everything matched what Marcia had described. To me, the key point was not the amount. It was the name at the top. Mine. Not mine plus somebody else. Just mine. The manager asked if I wanted any changes. I made one small request. Something simple that gave me easier access where I needed it. He processed it without comment. When I left, I carried only a sealed envelope with a few papers inside. No checks, no bundles of cash. I did not need to see the money to know it was there. On the way home, I took a different road. Instead of going straight back to the house, I turned toward the highway that led out of the city, toward the foothills. The drive to the second property took just under an hour. The road curved past small towns and old farmhouses, then up into quiet streets lined with pines. When I pulled into the gravel driveway of the cabin, the sight of it settled something inside me. The place was modest. One story, wood siding, a small porch with 2 chairs. I had fixed it up over the years when Marianne was still strong enough to come out for weekends. We had painted the walls a soft color she liked. I had built shelves in the small living room for her old paperbacks. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Dust had settled on some surfaces, but the air did not smell stale. The last time I had been there was months ago, before Marianne's health took the final turn. The furniture still sat where we had arranged it. The blanket Marianne always used when she got cold lay folded on the back of the sofa. I walked through each room slowly: bedroom, kitchen, small bathroom. I opened cabinets, checking what was there: plates, towels, a couple of extra sets of bedsheets, enough to live a quiet life without needing much. I did not bring boxes or suitcases that day, but I carried my envelope from the bank and Marcia's folder in my bag. I took them out and set them on the small table near the window. For a moment, I just looked at them lying there. The cabin was not fancy. It would not impress Clive's clients or make Ryan feel like he was living some big success story, but it was paid for. Solid. Mine. If I needed to, I could leave the city house behind and live here alone. That thought did not feel like defeat. It felt like a choice. I stayed an hour. I swept the porch. I checked that the heater still worked. I sat in one of the porch chairs and watched the trees move in the wind. In the quiet, I pictured Ryan walking through the city house with an agent, imagining renovations that would never happen. On the drive back, my phone vibrated twice in the console. When I stopped at a light, I glanced at the screen. First, there was a message from Clive in the family chat. He wrote that he was glad the estate meeting was scheduled. He said it was about time things were formalized. He reminded everyone that Marianne had always wanted a fair arrangement. Then there was a private message from Ryan. He wrote that he hoped I was ready to be practical. He said he had been looking at numbers and that the house could solve many things if we used it properly. He mentioned his student loans, a hint about a business idea, a line about how selling now would be smart while the market was high. He ended with something that was supposed to sound kind. He wrote that I had had my time with the house and that it was time to think of the next generation. I did not answer right away. I drove the rest of the way home in silence, letting the message sit on my phone like an unopened letter. When I pulled into the driveway, Lily's car was parked at the curb. She was in the kitchen, holding a mug of tea and staring out the window when I walked in. She turned and looked at the bag on my shoulder, then at my face. She asked if I had been out. I said yes. She asked if it was with the lawyer. I said partly. She waited, hoping I would say more. When I did not, she sighed and sat at the table. She told me Ryan had been talking. She said he had told her not to worry, that after the estate meeting things would be taken care of. She said he had sounded confident, almost excited. She admitted she was afraid of what that meant. I sat down opposite her. I told her she did not have to be afraid for me. I reminded her quietly that her mother was not careless, that if Marianne had made plans, they would not be sloppy ones. Lily watched me for a long moment. Then she said I seemed different, stronger, less like someone waiting for things to happen to him. I did not know what to say to that, so I only smiled a little and changed the subject. We talked about her work, about a friend of hers expecting a baby, about small things that filled the spaces between larger ones. Later that night, after she left, I went to the garage again. By now, the workbench had become less of a place for wood and screws and more of a command center. The radio hummed in the background as I laid out everything I planned to bring to the estate meeting. I did not take every document I owned. Marcia had told me clearly which ones were needed. I created 3 main folders with tabs I wrote myself in black marker. One said house, one said cabin. One said simply, "Instructions." I placed Marianne's letter in that last one, not because it was needed legally, but because I wanted it there. Her handwriting had become a kind of compass. When doubt crept in, I looked at that page and remembered why I was doing any of this. I also printed a copy of one short email Marianne had sent to me years ago, when we first talked about the idea of the cabin. In it, she had written that she wanted me to have a place that was mine, no matter what happened. I slid it into the same folder. I added a small notebook where I had written a few simple sentences in my own words. They were not speeches, just reminders. What Marianne had said she wanted, what I was willing to accept, what I was not. As I worked, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mrs. Cray, our neighbor from across the street. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed and quiet. She had seen more of our lives than most of my own relatives. She wrote that she had seen a man with a clipboard outside earlier. She assumed he was from a real estate office. She asked gently if everything was all right. I replied that everything would be all right soon. She sent back only 2 words. She wrote, "Good. Finally." The days slipped by until it was almost time for the estate meeting. The night before, I slept in short stretches, not from fear, but from my mind running through sequences. I imagined walking into the community center. I imagined faces. I imagined listening more than speaking. In the morning, I dressed the way I used to for important presentations at work. Clean shirt, pressed pants, shoes that still shined when you gave them a quick rub. I did not wear a tie. Marianne had always said I looked strangled in one. I put the 3 folders into my bag carefully. I added my notebook and a copy of the meeting invite, even though I knew where and when to go. I glanced at the photo I had wrapped in a towel and placed on the side table days earlier. I left it where it was. Before I walked out, I took one last slow turn through the house. In the hallway, I paused at Ryan's old bedroom. Posters still hung on the walls, faded at the corners. On the shelf sat a model car we had built together when he was 12. For a moment, I thought of bringing it with me, then decided against it. Not everything needed to move. In the living room, I stood by the window and looked out at the street. The sky was overcast. Leaves moved in the slight wind. Across the road, I saw Mrs. Cray's curtain flick back as she peeked out, then close again. I locked the front door behind me and walked to the truck. The drive to the community center took only 10 minutes. The building was low and plain, with a row of cars already in the lot. I recognized Clive's shiny sedan and Ryan's compact car immediately. Lily's older hatchback sat at the far end, slightly crooked in the space. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I thought about the way Ryan had spoken about the house. I thought about Clive's messages. I thought about Marianne sitting in the hospital bed, saying that she hoped I would let someone take care of me for once, and how in the end she had done that herself. I picked up my bag, opened the truck door, and stepped out. Inside the center, the hallway smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee. A notice board on the wall held flyers for yoga classes, community dinners, and lost pets. At the end of the hall, a larger room stood with its double doors propped open. I could hear voices inside. Ryan's quick and sharp, Clive's smooth and confident, Lily's quiet and uncertain. Another voice, Marcia's, cut through at intervals, calm and measured. I walked toward the sound. As I reached the doorway, the conversation inside dipped for a second. Heads turned. Ryan was sitting on one side of a long table, his hands wrapped around a plastic cup of water. Clive sat beside him, leaning back in his chair like he was settling in for a negotiation he expected to win. Lily sat on the other side, closer to the wall, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Marcia stood near the end of the table with a stack of papers in front of her. All of them looked at me. For the first time since Marianne's funeral, I felt fully seen. Not as a formality, not as a problem, but as the person everything here actually depended on. I stepped into the room, let the door ease shut behind me, and walked slowly toward my chair as the murmur of voices faded into a tense, waiting silence. Marcia gestured to the chair at the end of the table. "Harold," she said, "we were just about to begin." I sat down, set my bag on the floor, and folded my hands in front of me. The plastic tabletop was cool under my palms. Ryan watched me with a look that mixed impatience and relief, like he'd been waiting for the final piece of a puzzle he already believed he'd solved. "Now that everyone's here," Marcia said, "we can start." She stayed standing. Her presence filled the room more than her size should have allowed. She explained that this meeting was about Marianne's estate, her instructions, her decisions, and how they affected all of us. She said she would go through the main points and answer questions. Clive leaned back in his chair and smiled like he was settling in for a show. Lily sat small and straight, eyes on the table. Before Marcia could continue, Ryan spoke. "Actually," he said, "this makes things easier." He looked at me. His eyes were bright, excited. "Dad," he said, "I was going to tell you later, but you might as well know now. We got an incredible offer on the house. I accepted it. You can start packing. The house is sold." Lily's head snapped up. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't move at all. He said it like a victory, like he'd finally done what needed to be done. Clive nodded approvingly. "It's a strong number," he added. "You can be proud. This will set the next generation up very well." Marcia didn't look impressed. She looked at Ryan the same way she might study a poorly worded contract. "Mr. Whitford," she said slowly, "you accepted an offer on a property you don't own." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean, don't own? It's my parents' house. My mom always said it was for the family. I'm just handling it for my dad." Marcia laid a thin stack of papers on the center of the table. "That's what we're here to clarify," she said. "Harold, may I?" I nodded. She picked up the first document and slid copies toward each of us. "This," she said, "is the current title to the house on Maple Ridge Lane. You'll see the most recent recording date highlighted." I looked down. I'd seen the same page in my garage, under fluorescent light. Now it lay under brighter bulbs, in front of the people who had been speaking over me for weeks. Lily scanned hers quickly. Ryan stared at his like it was written in another language. Clive didn't pick his up right away. Marcia continued. "As of 3 years ago," she said, "Marianne transferred her share of the property to Harold. She did this after extensive discussion. From that date on, the house has been solely in Harold's name, not jointly held, not held in trust for anyone else. Solely." Silence settled over the table. Ryan blinked. "That's not possible," he said. "Why would she do that?" "Because she asked to," Marcia answered. "She was concerned that people might try to pressure Harold after her death. She wanted to make sure decisions about his home were his alone." Clive finally picked up his copy. His eyes moved faster than Ryan's. His jaw tightened. "This doesn't change the estate," he said quickly. "The house is still part of the inheritance. We're just talking structure." Marcia shook her head. "No," she said. "We're not." She took out another set of papers. "Marianne also created a separate document," she went on. "This outlines how her remaining assets should be handled. There's a savings account, currently holding $480,000. That account was retitled before her death." She slid another page toward us. "Per her instructions, that money passes directly to Harold. Not through the estate, not to the children, to Harold." Ryan's face flushed red. "All of it?" he asked. "You're saying she left everything to him? That doesn't make sense." Marcia stayed calm. "She left control to him," she said. "What he does with it is his choice. That was important to her. She did not want anyone else making decisions based on their own debts, business ideas, or urgency." Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced at Clive, searching for support. Clive cleared his throat. "Even if that's the case," he said, "we still have a pending sale. There's an offer. There are expectations. We can't just walk away from that without consequences." Marcia's gaze hardened slightly. "I spoke with the real estate office yesterday," she said. "Once I learned someone had represented themselves as able to sell a property they don't own, I thought it wise. I informed them that no valid listing agreement existed and that the person they'd been speaking with had no legal authority." She folded her hands. "The buyers have been notified that there is no sale." The words landed like a clean cut. Ryan swallowed. "You went behind my back?" he said to me. I shook my head. "I went in front of you," I said quietly. "You just didn't see it." Lily let out a breath she'd been holding. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Marcia wasn't finished. "There's one more thing Marianne requested," she said, and this is the part she called her respect clause. Ryan laughed once, a dry, shocked sound. "Her what?" Marcia lifted a single page. "Marianne asked that any access to her remaining personal items or sentimental assets be conditioned on how Harold was treated after her death. She wrote, in her own words, that if any family member attempted to erase him, pressure him, or treat him as a burden in relation to his own home, she wanted her legal documents to reflect that." She looked straight at Ryan and Clive. "Based on the messages, meetings, and statements Harold has recorded and described," she said, "I'll simply say this clause is now active. That means any expectation of directing his decisions is gone. Permanently." Ryan's hands curled into fists on the table. "So what now?" he said. "He just keeps everything? We get nothing? After everything we did for her?" Lily turned toward him, eyes bright. "Everything you did?" she said softly. "Or everything he did?" Ryan glared at her, then he looked back at me. "What are you going to do, Dad?" he demanded. "Just sit in that house until you die?" I thought of the cabin, quiet under the pines. I thought of the heater clicking on, the chairs on the porch, the envelope on the small table by the window. "No," I said. I reached down, lifted one more folder from my bag, and set it on the table. "This," I said, "is the other property. The cabin your uncle said wasn't a smart investment." Ryan frowned. Clive's head snapped toward the folder. "It's mine," I said. "Paid for. The house is mine. The savings your mother left are under my name. I can stay, I can go, I can sell, I can give, but I will decide." The room went very still. The hum of the ceiling lights seemed louder. Ryan shook his head slowly, like he couldn't make the picture match what he'd expected. "You can't do this," he muttered. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said quietly. "I'm just not letting you do something to me." Marcia stacked the papers in front of her. "Legally," she said, "this is settled." She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Chairs scraped the floor. Lily wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Clive stared at the documents like they were a wall he hadn't seen on his own map. I picked up my bag, slid the folders back inside, and stood. Ryan said my name once, sharp, like he wanted to pull me back into the old role. The man who nodded. The man who signed where he was told. I didn't answer. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the corridor. The sounds of the community center drifted in from far away, children's voices in another room, a vacuum cleaner humming somewhere down the hall. Behind me, the room stayed hushed. I didn't look back. The last thing I heard before the door clicked shut was the soft slap of paper hitting the table as someone finally dropped the stack of documents that said, in clear ink, exactly whose life they'd been trying to sell.